So, hello, and today I'm honored to sit here with one of the top 25 people who will define the business in the future, business world in the future. This is Alexander Nix. He is the CEO of Cambridge Analytica. Alexander, nice to meet you here at Live IT Arena.
Hello, Oksana. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And, the things what you are doing, I mean, everyone who knows about Trump right now knows about you as well. Because, as we know, you just put your efforts into this Trump's campaign. So can you tell us more about this micro-targeting service?
Well, yes, look, obviously, the Trump campaign has been very well documented in the media. But really, what's happening in communication and advertising is much broader than just the political space. We're actually seeing technologies such as data and analytics and the integration of behavioral sciences fundamentally changing the whole of the communications industry. And advertising and marketeers are suddenly having to understand these technologies and learn how to augment them into their existing capabilities. So microtargeting is really the idea that you can use very large-scale data sets to understand audiences at a very individual level. And the idea is to be able to help customers to build a ever more personal relationship with their favorite brands by speaking to them as individuals and not homogeneous groups.
Isn't it a space to manipulation?
I beg your pardon?
A space of to manipulation. I mean, if I am, for example, a brand, and then I have very targeted micro message to each one, then I can in this way just to influence their mind, the people's mind.
Actually, no, I don't. I think quite the opposite. I think people are increasingly getting fed up with being bombarded by messages for products and services that they don't necessarily want to buy or can't afford to buy. And what this allows you to do is to start to identify which products, which services are most relevant to which audiences, and then start to speak about those or to message those products in the most relevant way. So if you're in the market to buy a car, it's not about changing the product, it's about emphasizing the features you care about. So you might care the fact the car has a big engine and can go very fast, whereas I might care about the fact that it has incredible brakes and is very safe. That's not changing the product, it's just making the most relevant communication to each consumer.
Google and Facebook are doing this right now by this Google targeted advertising. So how your company works and with which clients does it work concerning this advertising thing?
Well, yes, Google and Facebook are certainly entering this market, and they have their own technologies. At the moment, however, it's a bit of a one-size-fits-all. This is the difference between buying clothing from a supermarket or having something made for you. What we're trying to do is work with clients, with their data, to understand their customers at a very personal and granular level, and then to use these information to speak to their customers in a very bespoke or personalized way. This is not a one-size-fits-all, and that's certainly what Google and Facebook are offering at the moment.
And what will happen, for example, there are presidential elections and there are 2, 3, 4 candidates and they all using the services you provide and they put like very personalized messages to each voter. How do you envision the future will exist with this condition?
Well, look, technology is always evolving and it's always impacting both communications generally and political campaigns. Look no further than the impact of the television only 50, 60 years ago. Clearly had a massive role in elections at that time. This is another tool in the armory. This is not about saying that data and behavioral sciences are going to replace TV and radio and everything else. No, we saw how digital has come in and augments television. Now we're seeing how data is coming in as an additional service to help you target in a more accurate and personalized way. The suite of products is simply increasing, and I think that will continue. And as technology evolves, tomorrow there'll be something else that will be exciting and interesting.
And concerning the data, there are different markets, for example, America is more about social networks, but there are some countries where social networks and internet penetration is not that high. So what's the differences in gathering data, like personal data to give those personalized messages, for example, in Middle East and in the US, to your opinion?
Well, look, there are very few countries that have as much data available and have such a legislative environment, such a permissive legislative environment as the United States. So that's a benchmark in itself. But even in Europe, where there's it's much more of an opt-in culture for data, and further afield where there's less data, you can still do a great deal. You don't need thousands of data points to build models. You need hundreds or even less. Hypothetically, you can build a model of just a handful of data points. But if you can't actually go out and acquire or license data sets, you can actually collect first-party data yourself. There's nothing to stop people from using market research instruments to go and speak to thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people to gather enough data to build a model that could be relevant, maybe not at the individual level, but certainly at the group level.
Mm-hmm. And concerning the level relevance, I know that this may sound like a vague question, but which points for the data set for a person needs to be gathered? I mean, which are basic data points? Are those like person's age, gender, or is there some other points?
Well, actually, I can't answer that question. Clearly, core demographic information is often at the foundation of a database, but it really depends what you're trying to achieve, what your objectives are. And for different objectives, different data is going to be relevant. What I can say is that very often some of the data sets that are ostensibly less important can deliver incredible insight, an unexpected insight that you wouldn't necessarily be searching for in the first place.
So at first you need to build a data model, then to understand which factors are influencing the model. And those can be very unpredictable factors.
Absolutely, and it's by having a really open mind that you can get squeeze the most juice out of the lemon, metaphorically speaking, in data. Is not having any precepts about what data is going to be valuable and what isn't, and start to model everything, and you can really start to find some insights.
And where do you usually gather data? From social networks, or you're doing these focus interviews, or other sources as well?
Well, normally we start by looking at large consumer and lifestyle data sets. So this is data on shopping habits, what car you drive, what magazines you read, what media you consume generally. You can augment that with some social media data. You can look at demographic and geographic data, economic data. As we move towards the Internet of Things, data is becoming more ubiquitous. Data is going to be ever present in every part of our lives, and the means to capture that. And so, I think finding data as we move forward is going to become less of an issue. Data is like ingredients. You go to a supermarket, it's full of ingredients. That doesn't mean or doesn't guarantee you're going to have a delicious meal. It's not the data itself. It's having the good chefs. It's being able to turn that data into insight. That's the valuable bit.
Thank you, Alexander. Here we have an audience, and if you have some questions, you can frequently ask right now, because it's kind of open space where we can ask more and more questions. So does anybody has a question right now? Okay, nobody? Then I will ask a question which frightens me a bit, because I think that the world is moving forward and we have a lot of things changing. And I know about those Black Mirror series. Have you watched it, by the way?
I'm afraid not.
No? Okay, so Black Mirror is about some things which you're doing right now, and it's about the future, how it will look like. And I want to know how the future of communication and of this brand communication, people communication, will look like with your technology and with advancements of your technology.
Well, look, there are a number of technologies that are shaping the digital data landscape and communications landscape as well. I think what we do, data analytics, sits in the middle. On the other side, you've got, obviously, as I said before, the Internet of Things. As data becomes omnipresent, as we'll be able to gather data from really every source, from your fridge, from your car, from your smart television, you're going to need greater analytics capability to process that. But at the other end, we're seeing distributed ledger technology. We're seeing blockchain technology, which is providing accountability and transparency for these analytics. So I think it's going to be the combination of IoT, blockchain, and analytics that's really going to help data to play an important part, not just in communications, but in so many different sectors across industry.
Mm-hmm. Which industries do you consider as those those industry which will use the data and which will use this technology you consider right now?
Well, actually, I don't think it's confined to any particular industry, but the ones that I think are going to be most important is probably healthcare. I mean, I think what data has the potential to do in healthcare is unparalleled. The ability to chart chronic diseases, to understand at a very individual level people's health practices, their daily routines, their food, their diet, their alcohol consumption, their exercise patterns. I really think that's going to play a big part, being able to analyze that in an accurate way, use that to help understand diseases and so forth, and then, of course, to build these distributed ledgers to make sure that this is these sorts of data are protected in the right way is going to be very powerful.
If you talk about Cambridge Analytica, from which industries your clients come from?
Well, actually, we work across three core sectors. We have, obviously, the political division, which attracts the most attention. But ironically, it probably only accounts for less than 25% of our revenue, 20% maybe. We do 7 or 8 elections a year. It's a very healthy business. It's been around since the early 1990s. But equally important is our government and defense business, using data, using analytics, using psychology to understand often hostile audiences, trying to get them to change their behaviors, whether this is in regards to health, helping to prevent diseases, or change health practices. We do a lot of counter-radicalization. We do a lot of counter-terrorism work, and so forth. So these are really important things. Public information and communication campaigns are equally relevant for governments. The biggest area of our business, well over 50%, is the brand and commercial space. So this is going head-to-head with the big agencies in order to sell products that could range from automotive to FMCG or CPG to financial services or insurance or health or anything else.
Those agencies, don't they want to build their own capabilities in data science and analytics?
Well, indeed they do, and what we're seeing now is a lot of big agencies and big conglomerates, media conglomerates, investing heavily in new technologies. They're trying to buy in these capabilities. Obviously, it's quicker and easier to buy in technologies than to build them yourselves, but that doesn't always result in a seamless transition. And I think that there's going to be a period where an agency culture that hasn't really changed for a number of decades is going to have to pivot, and that's going to be complex, especially for a lot of the bigger agencies.
Maybe some questions already? Okay, then I will have full space here. So I would like to talk about yourself. So how did you get where you are right now? I mean, what were your interests? And you have a very interesting name of your talk, actually, here at IT Arena, from madman to massman.
Well, look, the talk summarizes what I've just described to you, which is this transition from the very traditional Madison Avenue, New York advertising agencies of the 1950s that were almost entirely creative-led towards mathmen, the idea that more and more scientists are going to be critical in the communications industry, using data analytics and an analytical approach to augment, not to replace, to augment creativity is going to be very important, and that's really what the talk's about. Actually, my background is neither of those things. I have a background in corporate finance, and I left that maybe about 13, 14 years ago to start working in this space, and I've been absorbed by this ever since.
Alexander, I see you have great presentation skills, and that's also supported with your talk at IT Arena. And what's the role of presentation skills in a scientist? I mean, you're a kind of scientist. You're doing the job of a data scientist right now, and no, right now as a CEO, but however, you are working with it.
Well, look, it's not critical that a scientist needs to be able to present, but it is important that if you are pushing the boundaries in these new areas, that you can communicate effectively what you're doing so that people can understand them. And I see my role and some of my colleagues' role is the ability to take some really quite complex work and to make it digestible to audiences so that they can understand what we're doing, so that people can begin to see the application of the sciences that we're bringing to their own businesses, and then to help them onboard these new products and services.
So the story, so the presentation is a story which data can tell to end user.
Well, look, I don't think people don't buy data. People buy the insight that you get from data. And I think, some people are very interested in data. Some people would like to understand more. But actually, it's a bit like driving a car. Most people, obviously not everyone, but most people, as long as their car gets them from A to B, they're not that interested in how the internal combustion engine works. But when it breaks down, obviously, they're more interested. But, it's a bit like that with data. I don't think many people really care about the nuances of what algorithms we're using or what IT clusters we're putting together. They're just trying to understand how they can maximize their return on investment, how they can target more effectively, increase their audience density, and get some measurement of effectiveness. And that's really what we're providing. So what we do behind the scenes is less relevant for clients.
Alexander, thank you so much for this talk. And to end this talk today, I want to ask you about your part of wisdom, because a lot of people will watch us maybe on YouTube or somewhere else. So what should I consider for the future of communication?
Well, that's a very open-ended question. I mean, I think the answer is just be open-minded that what we're seeing is a symbiosis of the creative arts and the sciences. And I think that's really exciting that these two disciplines are coming together, and they're going to, agencies are going to have to start working hand in hand as advertising agencies become more morph into tech agencies, which we've already seen with digital, but we're going to see to a greater extent. And it's going to be more job opportunities. It means that a market sector that's traditionally been dominated by a certain skill set is now going to be opened up to a much wider skill set, and I think that's very exciting.
And the very last question from my side. Should I protect my data, or could I protect my data nowadays?
Well, you certainly can protect your data, but this is not particularly sensitive data we're talking about. We're not talking about your financial records or your health records or anything else like that. We're talking about what magazines you read, what car you drive, possibly what you have for breakfast. I think most people put much more sensitive data than that on their Facebook posts, pictures of them out socializing and the like. And people don't seem too worried about that, certainly not the younger generations, the millennials and the next generation. So if they're not too worried about putting pictures like that of themselves on the internet, I'm sure they shouldn't be too worried about people knowing what car they drive.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much for this talk today.
Thanks, Oksana.